recording. Is it on YouTube?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's coming now.
Ah, yes, thank you. Okay, I'll start the introduction. So welcome everyone for joining us again at the VSET after a winter break. Good to see all of you. So today we have Deniz Kattwinkel from UCL, and the title of the presentation is Mechanisms Without Transfers for Fully Biased Agents. This is a joint work with Axel Niemeyer, Justus Preusser, and Alexander Winter. And we're also very glad to have two panelists, Yingni and Johannes Hörner. Thank you for joining us. Now, the format of this, just to remind you, if you lost the plot after such a long break, it's a presentation is 60 minutes, and that is followed by a 15-minute Q&A session towards the end. You can unmute yourself and ask questions if there are any clarifying questions, but there's chat is also open when we have co-authors, so we hope that there will be some actions in the chat. And the panelists will be doing most of the asking question and trying to engage with Deniz if he goes too fast or too slow. Now, as a reminder, next week we have Wilhelmine Katz from Utrecht talking about bounded reasoning and higher order uncertainty. And Deniz, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. First of all, to the organizers, this is like a fantastic opportunity. Also, thank you to the panelists. I think we were excited to have exactly you. I think you will find out on the literature slide. Also, thank you to everybody for coming, and thanks to my three co-authors who are all here. Yeah, so let's jump right in. This project is called Mechanisms Without Transfers for Fully Biased Agents. It is together with Axel Niemeyer, Justus Preusser, who were on the market this year, and Alexander Winter, who is going to be on the market next year. So, what is the So what is the idea of this, like this project and generally the broader agenda? If you think about mechanism design, the standard way we think about it is, or the standard example that comes to mind is the allocation of a good. Yeah? And if you think about that, usually we have, as the designer, we have two instruments. Yeah? So if you think about the Meyerson auction setting, we have the allocation decision and we have the transfer. Yeah? And with these two instruments, we basically solve some sort of screening problem, and then also use these two instruments to use, to implement, or to use this information to achieve some objective. Yeah, this can be efficiency or revenue maximization. What is the problem with the solution? The problem is that often we find ourselves in environments where we cannot use monetary transfers. Yeah, and I want to point out only some. So if you think about the allocation of resources and tasks within an organization, yeah, often you cannot use monetary transfers in an organization. Yeah, there are other instances, for example, judicial or political decisions, where usually we have to design institutions that solve adverse selection problems without monetary transfers. And finally, one special case is the allocation of money itself. Yeah? If the good that we allocate is money itself, so if you think about redistribution or a federal government allocating money to local governments, then actually we don't have these two instruments, yeah, because they're the same. Yeah? Money is money. We cannot use these side payments to incentivize agents. So in all these situations, we are basically in a world of mechanism design without transfer. So the important thing is, what we're doing here is we do the usual thing, but we take one instrument away, the transfer. Yeah? And the model I'm going to show you will be very basic, very stylized. So we will have a principal who is facing a binary decision. There will be two agents. They will have some private information, which we allow to be correlated. And they will have completely opposed preferences. Yeah. So one agent wants to have one action, the other one wants to have the other action. And in this setup, we ask kind of very classical questions. So the first question will be, what mechanisms can be implemented? Yeah, this will be our first set of questions. And after we answer this question, we're going to look at the question is, when is it the case that the principal can do better than choosing her ex ante preferred option? Yeah. Okay. So of course we are not the first to look into this problem. So there's a wide body of literature. So I want to point out Johannes and Yingni's paper, which basically also look at allocation problems with transfers. And there the idea is to link intertemporal allocation problems and therefore incentivize agents to report their types truthfully. There are other methods to solve these kind of problems that we observe in practice. One is, for example, verification. Yeah, there's also a bit of newer literature which deals with how can we use correlated information in the setups of our transfers. But this literature is quite broad. Yeah, Tillmann's paper, for example, is one of the it's one of the papers that kind of pushed us into thinking about these problems. But there are many others, and like the more we read about this, the clearer it becomes to us that this is actually an old problem that we are working on. There's you will see that we will also speak to one branch of literature which is like started maybe with Kramer-McLean, other people say with Meyerson, which deals with how can we use correlated information to extract private information by the agents. And roughly there the message is that correlated information together with transfers is extremely powerful. The principal can extract almost all private information without paying any information rents. Yeah? And in a sense, you can see our project as asking this question without transfers. Okay. With this, so what I mean.
Deniz, one paper that I in Gertsensen here I still see missing, and I just wonder why is Gostner and Mertens on information structures in zero-sum games, precisely because you're looking at zero-sum games and you're asking. And it's going to be a lot about information structures and how they compare and what the impact is on the set of implementable allocations. Is there a particular reason? Is it unrelated? It's a very hard paper, so I don't know the answer.
No, I think it is related. I should have included that. Thanks for pointing this out. Okay. All right. So what is the plan? I'm going to talk a little bit about the model. Then it will be very short. Then we will think about implementability, do some comparative statics with that, and finally ask this question of when do profitable mechanisms exist. And finally, I want to show you what we have to say of the case when we have more than two agents. Yeah. Okay. So let's jump into the model. It is really, I was not lying, it's very stylized. So we have a principal who has to take a decision, left or right, and there are two agents, the left and the right agent. The agents hold private information, which we model as their private type, theta I, and we assume that the potential types are from a finite set, theta I. Yeah. So in terms of the distribution, we allow any distribution of these types. In particular, we allow any correlation. Yeah. We assume, and this is without loss of generality, that the marginals are positive. Yeah. The preferences of the agents are such that the left agent always wants the left action to be taken, and the right agent always wants the right action to be taken. Yeah. So we normalize the payoffs here for the left agent, like what the left agent gets when the left action is taken to 1. But I want to point out that we capture with this model the usual allocation problem. Yeah. If you think about the agent's type theta I being strictly positive, then this could be the valuation that the agent gets when he receives the good and 0 otherwise. Yeah, this is then this 1, 0 is here just a normalization. And the reason that we can make this normalization is exactly that we don't have monetary transfers here. Yeah, there's only one instrument. The agents only care about receiving the good or not. The principal, we assume, we normalize first what the principal yield gets from the right action to 0. So this is again without loss. And then we assume that what the principal gets from choosing the left action depends on the two pieces of information. Yeah? We call this function V. Yeah? This depends on theta L and theta R. And final normalization, we assume that the principal ex ante prefers action R. Yeah? Again, this normalization comes without loss. Okay.
So then you said it's without loss to normalize. I agree, and it's not without loss. But it's interesting to look at the zero sum. But the preferences could be dependent on the type, right? Have you thought about will it matter? It could very well be that you and I have perfectly misaligned interest exposed, but which way it goes could depend on the type.
Yes. So to be clear, what we could capture is, if the preferences do depend on the type, but only in terms of the intensities. Yeah?
Correct. Not the direction.
What you're asking,
what I'm wondering is, in general, it still could be zero sum, but it could flip depending on the type. Yeah.
Actually, that's a good question. I don't think that. Let me not speculate. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. That's a good point. All right. So in this setting, what we do is we look for the optimal mechanism. Yeah, and we assume that the principal can commit. So there's some sort of relation principle that we can invoke here. And what this means is that we can focus we can focus on mechanisms which specify for each pair of reported types, theta L, theta R, a probability of choosing L. Yeah, and these mechanisms will be such that that the agents are incentivized to report their type truthfully. Yeah. Okay. So I want to give you a small example. This is you should not take this example too serious. Yeah. This is just an example to fix ideas. The example is a budget allocation example. Yeah. So suppose that the principal is the division manager who oversees two departments. Yeah. And the agents are the department heads. Yeah, we call them the left and the right department. And the decision that the manager has to take is how to split a fixed budget between these two departments. We normalize it to 1. And now this probability of choosing left becomes the share of the budget that goes to the left department. We assume that these two department heads have private information, which is theta L and theta R. And this private information is somehow the determinants of the expected marginal returns for each of the departments, YL and YR. Yeah. And if we then impose our normalization that giving $1 to the right department yields 0, then we get as a principal's objective V this difference. Yeah? This is the difference of the expected marginal return of giving $1 rather to the left department than to the right department, given the two pieces of information available in the setup. Yeah? This is going to be our example. We will come back to that. Yeah. Okay. And now with this, we can basically formulate the principal problem as a usual linear program. Yeah. So just to remind you, if the principal chooses right, he gets 0. Yeah. So his objective is just this term. Yeah. So this is for type profile theta, this is the probability that the mechanism chooses left times what the principal gets from left being chosen. And this is subject to 2 sets of incentive constraints. First, for the left agent, it must be the case that reporting, if the left agent has type theta L, then reporting their type truthfully must maximize the probability of left being chosen, yeah, over all potential misreports. This is for left. And here it is crucial that you see that theta L enters the incentive constraint via the belief, yeah, via the belief of this agent has about his opponent's type. Yeah. then for the right agent, we can also formulate the incentive constraint. But for this agent, it must be the case that reporting truthfully from his type theta R must minimize the probability of left being chosen.
Denise, I have a question.
Yeah.
So in your setting, not only you constrain yourself to just using X, right? So you also assume that I cannot burn the budget, right? So
yes.
If you think about university, they can say, okay, now given a report this year, I'm going to just allocate $500,000 out of my 1 million budget.
Yeah.
So what happens if you can actually burn the money?
You will see that this will like crucially change the outcome. We in a sense, we don't know. Yeah, you will see in the proof of our implementation result that we really rely there on the zero-sum logic. Yeah. The answer is we don't know. Yeah. It is very important that we don't allow the agent to burn the budget here. We can say a little bit about this in the case of independence. Yeah, you will see in the very end. But in our general characterization of the implementable mechanisms would break down. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So with this, let's jump into the implementability result. Not quite. I want to stress this point. So what is the problem here? Yeah, was this a hard question for us? So if you think about what we have, because any pi is possible, so we allow any correlation, this means that we will have belief heterogeneity. Yeah, agents of different beliefs will have different types, will have different beliefs about their opponent's type. And this will translate into interim heterogeneity. Yeah, so if you fix one misreport and then you ask agents of different types about what they expect is happening after this misreport, the answers will be different. Yeah, and you see there already that the usual trick in mechanism design with independence, that we reduce everything to the on-path interim allocation does not work here. Yeah, the on-path interim allocation, like the probability that left is chosen if you report truthfully, is not sufficient as a statistic to decide whether a mechanism is incentive compatible or not. Yeah, we have to keep track of this richer interim allocations. Yeah, okay, and this is what our result exactly is doing. So so the proposition is the following: take any mechanism X, then the following is equivalent. This mechanism X is IC under some distribution pi. If the following is true, let me explain this before we go to the formula. So we take one agent, let's take the left agent, and suppose this agent has type 5. Yeah. Now this agent could ask himself, okay, what is the probability of left being chosen if I report type 1? Yeah, this will be some number. What is the probability of left being chosen if I report some type 4? It's also some number. What is the probability of left being chosen if I report truthfully my type 5? Yeah, it's also some number. What we need to have is that all these numbers are the same. Yeah, this is the case. They're of course also the same as the ex ante probability interim, the ex ante probability of this mechanism choosing the left action. Yeah, the same must be true for the right agent. Yeah, and if this is the case, then we know that the mechanism is incentive compatible. This way is is easier to understand. The other way is the surprising thing. So whenever you have an incentive compatible mechanism, it must be the case that it is in this sense constant in the interim allocation probabilities. Yeah, there's another part of this proposition that I want to explain after the proof because it will become more clear. Yeah, no worries, I'm not giving you the whole proof. I'm just giving you an idea. To do that, so let's remind ourselves what the exercise here is. Yeah? So the exercise is, I'm given a distribution pi, and now I have to find all mechanisms X such that they are incentive compatible. Yeah. So what does this mean? It means all mechanisms X such that these two sets of incentive constraints are fulfilled. Oh. Okay. If you stare, what we propose in the paper to do is to take a dual perspective. Yeah, we could also say, let's fix a mechanism and let's think about all the distributions for which this mechanism is incentive compatible. Yeah, and if you do that, then you're halfway there, because then if you stare long enough on these equations, you will see that we can formulate this problem as a related game. Yeah, so consider the following auxiliary two-player zero-sum game G, where the left player now chooses his type as an action, theta L. The right player, and he's a maximizer, the right player is choosing his type theta R as an action to minimize and the payment is, or the payoff is given by the mechanism x of theta L theta R. Yeah. So this is just a game. It's a zero-sum game because, you know, by definition it's a zero-sum game. But then if you go back to these two sets of inequality constraints, you will see that this is exactly the definition of pi, the distribution pi being a correlated equilibrium of this game G. Yeah, and once you see that, we can basically go back to this very old literature on correlated equilibria of a two-player zero-sum game, which on a very high level tell you that in a zero-sum game, there's not like the conflict between the two players is too strong, such that you can never do better than achieving with a correlated equilibrium than what you could get as the Nash value. Yeah, so we need to make this statement a bit more tailored to our setup. We do that. What we show is that in a correlated equilibrium, after any recommendation, you're indifferent between choosing any action that is chosen in the equilibrium, yeah, of the game. And if you think about this is exactly what we need for our characterization of the mechanism, yeah. And then the nice thing that we get out of that is that actually, if this is the case, then we can characterize the ex ante probability of choosing left as the Nash value of this game. And if you look at if you think about this is independent of the distribution pi. Yeah, this is this term. This is the last term of the proposition that was missing.
Deniz, if I can interrupt, I mean, it's very nice that this perspective, I find it very enlightening, but it does rely on a zero sum, and I wonder how much it relies also on the bilinearity, which is driven by the binary nature, namely whether we think of pi as the distribution and x as the decision, or x as the distribution and pi as the distribution. It really doesn't matter because it's entirely symmetric, so to speak. It's entirely bilinear, but if the choice of the principal was a non-binary decision, then you still would have the zero sum. You could still have it strictly competitive, but it would be now a little bit trickier because there would be a third argument, so to speak, in the x, right? Have you thought a little, the actual decision? So do you need really? To what extent do you need both assumptions? The binary plus the zero sum. You emphasize the zero sum, you don't emphasize the binary. So I'm just trying to.
Yeah. So that's a very good point. So it is true that we can characterize every, we have this, we can characterize every solution as the solution of a correlated equilibrium. So every, incentive compatible mechanism is equal to the correlated equilibrium, but we don't know much about a correlated equilibrium if we don't have binary. I think this is where we, in this sense, we need to make statements, we need both assumptions. And in some sense, this is also, what makes us a bit pessimistic, yeah, because this is a very, this is a well-studied problem, and people that are much smarter than us kind of, didn't produce any good results in the 70s. So I think we kind of need both assumptions for that reason. But it is true that this characterization of an incentive compatible mechanism as a correlated equilibrium might be we were very excited about it, but so far we couldn't use this to get more structure on this problem. So we need really this binary thing to get this clear prediction or this clear prescription of what an incentive compatible mechanism is.
Thank you.
And this is also going back to Yingni's question. Here you can see what is happening if you allow the principal to throw away the good. Yeah, this is going to destroy the zero-sum character of this game, because then throwing away the good is something that both agents hate. Yeah, that is not a zero-sum. That's negative for both of them. Yeah, this will break our logic. Yeah, okay.
I have a comment, but we can follow up after the talk. I think from this slide, it looks like some version of the state-dependent preferences would work as well, but we can talk about that after. Yeah, let's do that. That would be super interesting. Yes.
Okay. So I want to point out here, and I want to do this with an example, that this is not the end of mechanism design in this setup. Yeah, so you could be a bit pessimistic or a bit depressed and say, well, you showed us interim, everything must be constant, so what can we do? What I want to show you with this example is there's a lot to do. Yeah, so a mechanism that is IC, aka interim constant, is not constant. Yeah, it is, and let's see this with an example. Yeah, suppose that we have two types. They are independently distributed and equally likely for both players, A and B. And suppose that the principal wants to choose left whenever the types match. Yeah. So his utility from doing that is 1, and he wants to choose right whenever they don't match. Yeah. Then his utility from choosing left is -. Yeah. So I'm claiming that you can get the first best here. And what is the first best? Well, the first best is to choose left whenever the types match. So the question is, why is this incentive compatible? Well, if you think about it, then if suppose you're the left player here, and you have absolutely, because we have independence, you have absolutely no idea about what your opponent is going to report. Yeah, so your type, like we have independence, so for you both reports of your opponent are equally likely. So you're happy to report your type truthfully. Yeah, because you don't know if you're in this row or in this row. Yeah, and therefore this is IC and yields an expected payoff of 1/2. Yeah, whereas if you would insist on a constant mechanism that chooses one action left or right, regardless what the agents say, then you would always get 0. Yeah, so this is kind of the hopeful message in this setup. There's a lot to do for us designers. Yeah, okay. Before we do that, let's think a little bit about comparative statics for implementation. Yeah. So what do I mean? I mean, okay, let's fix the set. Let's take a distribution pi and let's define the correspondence that maps pi into into the sets of all incentive compatible mechanisms as X. Yeah. And now we ask the question. So this is our comparative static question. If we change pi now in some form, how does the set X change? For that, like to have meaningful comparative statics, we need some kind of partial order on the sets of distribution, and we say type like a correlate, like a distribution pi spans another distribution pi tilde if each interim belief that an agent can hold under pi tilde is a linear combination of some interim belief that he can hold under pi. Yeah, it is important that we have a linear combination here. Yeah, this is not like usually we think about this in the sense of Blackwell. If this is not a Blackwell order, yeah, a Blackwell order would have here instead of linear combination, convex combination. Yeah, but we allow for more. This order is, you can go more extreme if you think about it. You can. So what is the intuition for this order? The intuition is the same. It's a very rough intuition, but the interim beliefs under pi are richer in the sense of linear dependence. So I can build everything you can like every interim belief you can hold under pi tilde. I can build some linear combination of the interim beliefs you can hold under pi. So this means this is richer, and we identify this with being more correlated. Yeah. So this, the spanning, the spanning condition defines a pre-order on the type distribution. You can verify that pi, if you take a distribution pi and then you look at a distribution which has the same marginals but is independent, yeah, then this pi always spans, of course, this independent type distribution. Yeah, in this case, actually, this is even a convex combination. Yeah. And we find actually that in this order, the independent distributions, they are the minimal elements of the preorder, of our preorder. Then if you want to think about the other extreme, when does a distribution pi span every other span every other distribution pi tilde? Well, this is the case if and only if pi has full column and row rank. And in fact, actually, this is a condition we know from the literature. This is exactly Cramer-MacLean's full rank correlation condition. This is also, these full rank distributions are in our order also the maximal elements in this preorder. So we, like, all distributions are basically in between the minimal and the maximal elements, but it's a preorder, so and a partial order. So how does this help us? Well, what we get is that if pi spans pi tilde, then all mechanisms that are incentive compatible under pi are also incentive compatible under pi tilde. So moreover, this means that if a mechanism X is IC under pi, then X is also IC under pi tilde as when pi tilde is the corresponding distribution with independence and the same marginals. On the other hand, we have that if a distribution has full rank, then the only mechanisms that are incentive compatible are IC mechanisms. So what does this mean kind of in terms of, like on an abstract level? It means that more correlation like shrinks the set of incentive compatible mechanisms. The more correlated the types are, the harder it is for the designer, the less freedom the designer has in constructing a mechanism. And this is a result that is contrasting the world we know with monetary transfers. If you think about Cramer-MacLean tells us that in the allocation with transfers, the full rank correlation is actually the best of all worlds. Then we can get full info extraction without paying any information rents, and we can exactly not do that under independence. Now, if you take away this instrument of transfers, or you want to think about the allocation of transfers, then this is flipped around. Full rank correlation shrinks the set of incentive compatible mechanisms to the constant mechanisms that do not take the information from the agent into account. So we have no information extraction. On the other hand, the independent mechanisms maximize the implementation set. So we have the most info extraction. For us, this was surprising that we get this clear prediction in this world without transfers. Okay.
Sorry, Deniz, I find that absolutely magical and beautiful that the order is in a sense the opposite, though. I forgot whether in Cramer-MacLean their partial order. So you highlighted the extreme points of the partial order and said, in one case you get full rank extraction, in the other case you don't. Number one, does Cramer-MacLean get you exactly the same result in the reverse, meaning if pi spans pi tilde, then in terms of rent, you understand what I mean?
No, it doesn't.
Right. So sorry.
It doesn't. Like Cramer-MacLean
does not.
Yes.
Okay.
Cramer-MacLean concentrates on the full info extraction for the full rank correlation.
So meaning it is incorrect. The claim that it would be reversed is incorrect, or they just don't show it.
I don't know. That's a good question. So it's a good question. I don't know.
So for the extreme points that you exactly flip their result, but yes, you're not quite sure it's the same order. It's the same condition they introduced, right? I remember they introduced span in precisely the same way that you do. But I don't think that they have a partial result.
No, they don't. They don't. So I should be careful with this.
If I can interject, isn't it also that you guys have this zero sum feature which buys you quite a lot here? Presumably Cramer-MacLean are more general there. So it might be that it does reverse, but you need something more about the preferences to make a full comparison, right? There's other things that are changed here from Cramer-MacLean, not just the presence of transfers, right? That's So my guess is that it will depend on whether you have zero sum or not, or something like this.
Sure. Like in my paper, for example.
But sorry, just to interject again, I mean, except for the transfers, the zero sum aspect, as Deniz was emphasizing, given that the intensity is irrelevant in his framework, is preserved in Cramer-MacLean. Everybody wants the good. right? So either I give the good to Deniz or I give it to Max.
Yeah.
I cannot, and in that sense, it is zero sum if it wasn't for the transfers, right? So Deniz's framework is exactly Kremer-MacLean without the transfers. Because once you subtract the transfers, Kremer-MacLean is zero sum.
Right, but my point is, with the transfers, then there's more that you could do. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. Like, and you know, like Kremer-MacLean is you know, he has more agents, and you know, but it is correct what Johannes is saying. We can find an instance of Kremer-MacLean where Kremer-MacLean would predict for our model with transfers that you can fully extract the rent, where we say under full correlation, where we say under full correlation, you cannot do that. Yeah, you can not extract any information.
So the conjecture is if you had zero sum in Kremer-MacLean allowing for transfers, which is it would be interesting to go and check whether this thing is exactly reversed.
In some sense,
yeah.
In some sense, introducing money is breaking the zero sum logic. Yeah. So I can say you have very high valuation. I give you the good, and I give someone else money. So everybody's.
But is that necessary? So you could say that there are two agents, and whoever has the good gets the good has to pay to the other agent, not to the mechanism design.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the same thing. You can still make it with zero sum, but with transfer.
Yes.
Yeah, balancedness.
Okay, so you're saying that we should look at mechanisms where I kind of impose the transfer to be in a zero sum manner, and then see what would happen. Yeah, that's a good suggestion. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to answer this question.
Deniz, if I might also interject, I mean, there obviously your setup is somewhat restrictive, but you might have something desirable that they don't. I just don't know. Do you have continuity in pi, right? Because they have this lack of robustness, so to speak.
Yes, we have. That's a very good question, and we don't. We have the same problem as if you see discontinuity as a problem, just reversed. I think I have an example on that. Let me see. Yes, here we go. Yeah. So, you know, there's this uneasiness about Kremer-MacLean that, you know, you have something a little bit correlated, and then you can do full surplus extraction, then you make it independent, and whoop, you cannot. Yeah. We have the same, but reversed. So we have seen that with independence, we can, we can extract like all information, get the first best implemented. This is the old example. Now, if we add a little bit of correlation, so in form of this epsilon, it doesn't matter how we do that. Like it will always be, this matrix will have always full rank. And then we know from our characterization, the only thing we can do is the constant mechanism, and we know that this yields zero. Yeah. So there we see that we drop for every epsilon, we drop from 1/2 to 0. Yeah. And we have the same discontinuity, just reversed. Okay. With this, we go to basically the next step. And we want, you know, now we understand somehow what the implementable mechanisms are, but we want to know when it is worth to communicate with the agents. Yeah. And we formulate these questions formally. Remember, we normalized everything such that if you're not able to talk to the agents, then you would always choose the right action and get 0. Yeah. So what we ask now is, when is an IC mechanism profitable in the sense that it yields the principal an expected payoff that is better than the preferred decision? And this is exactly when we have an IC mechanism X such that this term is positive. This is the question. We in the paper we answer this question for an arbitrary correlation structure. Today we are going to focus on independence. So we make one assumption, and this assumption comes at a loss. We assume that the principal is unbiased. Yeah? So this means we assume that the principal is, if he actually ex ante, he's indifferent between choosing left and right. Yeah? If he would have to commit to choosing one action before he can consult the agents, he would not mind left or right. Yeah? And under this assumption, what is crucial is to understand the following additively separability of the value function of the principal, and we say the value function is additively separable if you can write it as a sum of two functions which each only depend on the pieces of information that the respective agents hold. Yeah, this is what we need to characterize this, and with this we get our proposition. So again, here this is with independence. In the paper we are more general for any correlation. Here we say suppose that the types are independent, then if the principal is unbiased, this is our assumption here, then a profitable mechanism exists if and only if this objective is not additively separable. Yeah, again, this is a bit going against the logic or like the folk wisdom we have from mechanism design with transfers. So first, this is a reminder of what we've seen before. We saw that informational interdependence was bad. Yeah, this kind of more correlation was making the set of incentive compatible mechanisms smaller. What we see here now is that value interdependence, which is good in our world. Yeah, whenever we have value interdependence, such that I cannot write this as the sum of these two pieces of information, then we can do something. Then it is worth to communicate with the agents. Yeah, and we can translate this, and this is the reason for our example.
Sorry, Deniz. Yes. Why do you need a? Can you go back one slide?
Yeah.
Why do you need this unbiased assumption? Can you give some intuition? Basically, it means that X and T are indifferent between both left and right options, right?
Yes, we need this unbiased assumption because, in a sense, if you, okay, maybe let me answer this later.
Okay.
Let me answer this in a second. Yeah, or maybe in the I come back to that. Yeah. Okay. So, what does it mean? It means that for our example, again, we have the principal being the division manager overseeing these two departments. The agents are the department heads, left and right, and the decision is how to split a fixed budget. Yeah, and we assume now, this is important, that the information that the two department heads hold are independent, but jointly determine the expected marginal returns for each department. Yeah, so we ended in this value function, and now when is this additively separable? Well, one, like if there are no information spillovers, in the sense that the marginal return of each department only depends on the information that the department head of this department holds. Yeah, then actually you see that this is additively separable. Yeah, so then no profitable mechanism exists. But generically, as soon as one department head holds some information that is also relevant for the expected marginal return of the other department, then we are in business. Yeah, then we predict that there's a value of designing the optimal mechanism. Yeah. And we can, generically, a profitable mechanism exists. Yeah, it can be, of course, that that this is still separable. Yeah, but generically it is not. Yeah, and this should give you some idea of when we can use profitable mechanisms. Okay. All right. Let me. So the proof of this result is, I don't want to go into details, but what we do is we basically look at the subspace of these additive objective functions, yeah, and then we say that we project the objective function into the subspace. If there is no, if this objective function is additively separable, then there's no residual. If there is one residual, so if this is the case when the objective function is not in this space, then we can use this residual and construct the optimal mechanism along this residual. Yeah. So the problem here is, so why don't I give you a full characterization of the optimal mechanism? The problem here is that often these optimal mechanisms are characterized by where we hit the boundary. Yeah. So the X can only be 1 Yeah, must be smaller or equal than 1. So what we do instead is we say we start basically with a mechanism in the middle, and then we show you when is this mechanism going to be, when can we improve this mechanism? Yeah, and in order to make this argument, we need this unbiasedness assumption. Yeah, so this because then we know that, you know, like the mechanism in the middle does as good as any constant mechanism. Yeah, and then from there on we can improve and can make the argument. Yeah, that is the reason. Okay. All right. So I have 15 minutes. Let me, you know, this is a project with 3 amazing co-authors. So this is a real joy to work on, and they're like you know, like they're like, when we wrote this, there were more and more ideas coming up. So this is another idea on how to characterize profitable mechanisms. So I want to mention that. So it is, again, like it is in some sense parallel, yeah, but we get away from this unbiasedness assumption in this characterization of profitable mechanism. And I think it's in itself an interesting way to think about this problem. Yeah, and the way, you know, we started thinking about this is, suppose you have a mechanism X, yeah, and suppose this mechanism is really dumb, yeah, so it is just doing L all the time, yeah. So then, you know, if I'm an outside observer of the mechanism, I don't know the types, I only observe the mechanism, then I don't learn anything from the mechanism, yeah. So in this sense, what is like P times X? So this is the, you know, this is what I, you know, if you think about it, P times X is not usually a probability measure, but is proportional to a probability measure that I would use to update my beliefs if I'm not observing the types of the agents, but only observing the result. Yeah. So, you know, this is this, in a sense, this mechanism is, if you use a constant mechanism, we don't really change this measure pi, yeah? Pi times X is basically the same as pi. It is more interesting if we take a non-constant mechanism. Yeah, suppose, for example, the mechanism would be to allocate, to choose left whenever the types match. Yeah. Now, if I observe like what the mechanism does, I can update my beliefs about the types. So if left is chosen, I know the types are the same. Yeah, and in this sense, if you have a non-constant mechanism, then pi times X is a new measure on pi. Yeah. And we want to think about designing a mechanism. Instead of thinking about designing a mechanism, we want to think about designing these measures. Yeah. And and the question is, which measures can we use, or can we design that are induced by IC mechanisms? Yeah. And the answer was surprisingly well, not simple, but surprisingly tractable. Yeah. It is these are the mechanisms. So, by the way, I forgot to say this. So far, this is all under independence. Yeah, we have an independence assumption now. Yeah. So under independence, these are exactly the mechanisms whose marginals are proportional to those of pi. Yeah. You know, that's another characterization. But why is this interesting? Well, if you think about it, what do we have now? We have to choose a new measure pi tilde, which has some fixed marginals. Yeah. So I say proportional here because this new measure does not need to be a probability measure. If I never give, you know, if I only give the good with probability 1/2, then this will not add up to 1 in the end. But, you know, it's proportional to 1. And so what do we do here? We are looking for new measure pi tilde, which respects the marginals and maximizes some functional on the type profiles. Yeah? And if you think about this, or if you look at this formula, this is exactly an optimal transport problem. Yeah, and so we can translate this our looking for a mechanism into an optimal transport problem. And we can check if this optimal transport problem gives us a value strictly above 0. In this case, of course, we have a profitable mechanism. Yeah. And why was this exciting for us? Well, because we understand this polytope, this optimal transport polytope, we understand it quite well. Yeah. So we can now give you the optimal mechanism and how they look. Yeah. So let's make some assumptions to make this nicer, suppose that the types are identical, the type spaces are identical, and types are independent, and let's suppose that they're uniformly distributed. Yeah, every type is equally likely. And then what we call a match your opponent mechanism is a mechanism that chooses L if and only if, up to some relabeling, both agents make the same report. Yeah, so you have seen this mechanism before. This was in our 2x2 example. This was the first best mechanism. Yeah, it would choose left whenever the types would be the same and otherwise right. Yeah. So what I mean with this relabeling is we can permute the types of one player and then say, okay, your type 3 actually is type 4, and then whenever your types match, the real type of the left player and the permuted type of the right player, then we choose L. Yeah. And if you think about this kind of, what is this mechanism? Well, these mechanisms, these are exactly the extreme points of this polytope. Yeah. This is what Birkhoff von Neumann gives us. Yeah. So we know now, we know that we can express every IC mechanism as a weighted sum of these. Like this corresponds to the permutation matrices. So we can express every mechanism as the weighted sum of these match your opponent mechanisms. Yeah. So this kind of gives you an idea of how we can elicit information in this setup. Under more assumptions, namely that V is supermodular, then we all know what the optimal, what the best extreme point of the set is. Yeah. So if you have V being supermodular, then this is the situation of assortative matching, and then we know that the identity permutation matrix is the best we can do. Yeah, and this of course translates to the match your opponent mechanism without relabeling. Yeah, and then to check if a profitable mechanism exists, we can just look at this one extreme point which matches each type with the same type and see if this gives us something profitable. If this is the case, remember everything was uniform. So that's why we had we don't have the probabilities here, but this is exactly your expected payoff from this match your opponent mechanism without relabeling, and we can check whether this gives us something positive. And
Dennis, I'm sorry, there's something I don't understand. If here we're still doing discrete or finite types, right? So yeah. So suppose that we have 3 or more types. So matching your opponent means being on the diagonal of the matrix. Not matching your opponent means being off a diagonal. And there are more points off the diagonal than there are on the diagonal. So so why do you give it to L? I mean, so you're biasing this towards R? Is that what we're doing here?
No, but you can take any permutation, right? So you have this exact number of types. Yeah. Right. And I can take any permutation between these two, like any function that is bijective between these two types. Mm-hmm. And whenever we get a pair that is directly connected, then we do left. That is a nice that would be incentive compatible here. Yeah.
Okay, so, I'll ask you later. I'm not sure I follow, but okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So with this, we have also a condition that characterizes. So when we want to characterize this with under correlation, the condition is more complicated. Yeah. I don't want to go over it. Just on a very abstract level, what you can learn from this condition is basically this new measure that you create by designing a mechanism. This will, as we have seen, will induce new correlation. Yeah. So if I allocate whenever the types match, then in this X times P measure, there will be more or new correlation. And in some sense, what we show is that this new correlation must be orthogonal to the correlation that exogenously comes out of this distribution pi. Yeah, this is we can formulate this as an optimal transport problem with some orthogonality condition. Yeah, but I want to spare you this. If you want, we can talk about this in the Q&A. Yeah, because I want to say something about the more than two agent case. Yeah. So if you want to think about this problem with more than two agents, then the question is how what kind of you have to make some assumptions, and we think that the most natural way to think about this problem is as an allocation problem. Yeah. So what we are looking at now is an allocation problem with more than with n agents, so more precisely we say, okay, we have n agents, and they all have independent private types theta I. Yeah, and this is the value of this is their private information. Yeah, again, we normalize agents payoff from getting the good to 1 and 0 otherwise. The same, the same remark is in place here. We could well have that theta I, if theta I is always positive, that this is the value that the agent gets from receiving the good and 0 otherwise. Yeah, this is just a normalization. And then we say, for the principal's payoff, we allow anything. Yeah, the principal has a family of function, v1 to vn, which gives the utility of the principle of allocating to agent I. Yeah, this is vi, and this can depend on all the information that the agents have in this setup. Yeah, and then we assume that so far we assume that the principal cannot discard the object. Yeah, and then we recover our unbiasedness assumption. Here, in this case, unbiasedness means that the principal is indifferent between giving the good ex ante to each agent. Yeah? So each agent ex ante in expectation gives the principal the same allocation value. Okay, and with this we are ready to formulate our proposition. We say, okay, suppose there are n agents, and this is important here. We assume independent types, yeah? And assume that the principal has to allocate. So no, you cannot throw away the good. And on top of that, assume that the principal is unbiased. Yeah? And then we say a profitable mechanism exists if and only if the following is not true. Yeah? There do not exist a family of functions U1 to UN, each one for each agent, which only depend on this agent's information, theta I, yeah, such that we can explain all the differences in allocation value between I and J as a difference between their respective functions. Yeah? This is one way to formulate it, and this is closer to what we formulated in the n equal to 2 case. Maybe a more instructive way is to say this is equivalent if to the following situation, there exists one function W theta and functions for each agents U1 to UN, so W theta, this is going to be the common component, and UI theta I will be the agent-specific component. And we can write the value of allocating to agent I as the sum of this common component plus the specific component for agent I, which only depends on this agent's information. Yeah. So if we can write VI in this form, then there's nothing we can do as mechanism designers. We can go home. If we can't, then we can do strictly better than using a constant mechanism. Yeah. This is this proposition. And then finally, I'm almost out of time. Maybe one remark on that. So why do we need independence here? Yeah? With independence, actually, what we get is what we showed before is it was crucial for all we did to show that every incentive compatible mechanism is interim constant. Yeah, with independence, this is true for n bigger for n larger than 2. Yeah. What we don't know is what is happening for correlated distributions when n is larger than 2. Yeah. This is the missing link, if you want, and that's why we can formulate this proposition only for independent types. Yeah. Finally, if you think about this, then you will see that mathematically it is not very hard to incorporate here this throwing away the good. Yeah, you can just invent a dummy agent who has always value 0, and you can, but throwing away the good is just allocating to this agent. If you do that, then you arrive at our proposition 7. So we now assume that every agent's allocation value and expectation is equal to 0. So it's equal to this dummy agent's expected utility. So now what we get is, under all these assumptions, we have that there exists a profitable mechanism if and only if there's one agent. You have to find one agent who has interdependent types in the following, or interdependent value in the following sense: the value of allocating to this agent does not only depend on this agent's information, but must be in any form non-constant. For one theta j must be non-constant in theta minus j, the information the others hold. Yeah, whenever this is the case, you know that there exists a profitable mechanism. Okay, and with this, I would like to end here, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Right on time. Given that I had an introduction, you're probably 2 minutes short or something. Thank you again. So we are moving now to the official Q&A sessions, which will last about 15 minutes. We usually start with our panelists, if there are any final comments or reflections or questions at this stage, and then we'll move to audience.
Well, Deniz, I want to reach out a little bit, and you were quick at the end. So there is a sense in which independent, you think, is some kind of the best case scenario, given the results we've seen at the beginning in terms of doing things. And unbiasedness is also best case scenario in a sense, because that means somehow decisions are right. So the negative results that, if we call these private values, I understand that there's this W term, but it's essentially that's what we would call private values, right? So the negative results, so to speak, I guess you want to emphasize the positive, but do you know that the negative result, namely that if we have private values, we're screwed, so to speak, you can state it very generally, saying independent of the preferences, independent of the correlation, given that we couldn't get it when they're unbiased and independent, then surely we can't do it otherwise. Is that a correct conjecture?
I'm not sure, because you can do amazing things when you have correlation and more than 3 agents. So in some sense, so the example I always think about is, suppose you have 2 agents where you know that these types must be perfectly correlated, and then you can always give the good to the, whenever they file an inconsistent report, you can give the good to the 3rd agent, and this brings you a long way, even with private values. So in a sense, what really is missing to us is an understanding of how the implementable mechanisms look when you have correlation, and these are substitutes, whether you have more than 2 agents or you can throw away. And this is something that is, I don't know. I don't know at this point. Okay,
and if I can just follow up quickly with one more, which is, especially with 2 players, maybe easier than going with 3 would have been to think that the seller has private information as well, the designer, right? If I'm thinking about the auction framework, if it's the seller has a private cost, you'd have typed at a 0, and that kind of matters because the agents don't really know the conditional distributions. And have you thought a bit about that? Can you extend your characterization? It preserves zero sum, it preserves binary. It just adds this additional layer of private information on one side.
That's a good question. So basically, I thought about this with that's basically my job market pair with 1 agent and private information of the principal, and so we didn't think about it, but why I'm a bit excited about this is that you get this information without incentive constraints if this is private information by the principal, and maybe there can be, but we didn't so far. Yeah, but that's a good suggestion. Yeah.
Yingni, would you have any comments or questions?
Yes. Deniz, I think I have something to say about the title, right? So it looks like it's not fully biased; it's fully opposing, right? So it should not mean that it's fully opposing.
Well, this goes back to your earlier comment. If we can capture the fully opposing, it is like so far we have two things: they're fully opposing, and I know what they want. There's this other paper by Axel Niemeyer, which, well, is a bit different, but like you could say fully opposed, and still it's basically what you suggested, right? So fully opposed, and then we know that they hate each other, but we like for some type combinations, they one wants left and the other wants right. Yeah. But this would be an interesting question if we can capture this with the zero-sum framework and then get a result for that. Yes.
Okay. So I want to follow up on this state-independent preferences discussion we had. So my intuition is that if you add intensity of preferences, some version of your result still holds. But I was wondering what happens if not only we add intensity, but sometimes suppose my type A is -1, I actually don't want the good, right? So it seems that it's easier to induce information in that setting. That's one direction. The other direction I was thinking about is I would just maybe tonight, like just get your simplest example and then look at what happens if you add transfer but budget balanced, and you can scale up or down X, right? To see, I find it very, very intriguing that you get this opposing result that correlation actually hurts roughly, right? So, but what happens in between once you can add more instruments, right? So you can have a budget balanced T, but you can also scale up or down X. So it'll be interesting to see from one endpoint to the other what happens in between.
Yeah, I'm sure someone has done this, right? Budget balance can make clean, or is this impossible? I don't know. I should look. I think Timmer knows something about it.
Is he still here?
I think someone has done something about this, but I can send you an email.
That would be great. Yes, yeah.
I have to look up my sources, my book or something.
Yeah. The other thing you said with this -1, this also goes in this. If we like, so to be clear, like intensity is positive, intensity is fine. You just divide them out. We are in our world. Like if it's sometimes -1, yeah, that goes exactly to this point. Like what would happen if we can assume they're opposing, but we don't know who takes which camp, basically. That's a good question.
So if I hate it, if the other person likes it, that's great, right? So now if both hate it, it depends on who hated more, right?
I think that this is, I think this is really like throwing away, right? So, and I think this is destroying the zero-sum logic, and
oh no, I'm still keeping zero-sum, but now I think there are some type realizations such that I hate it, but you like it, right? So in this case, we can do better than.
Yes.
In this case, you naturally have a profitable mechanism.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe on this question. So actually, our characterization of IC at least does go through if we have multiple alternatives, as long as we maintain the zero-sum structure, and it also goes through if we have interdependent values with the binary decision. And I can even tell you the basic idea of the proof. Don't think of X as the physical allocation, but think of it as the agent's utility, which is all we need to describe IC. And then, that's not the total proof, but imagine the designer could just choose the ex post utilities of the agents directly. You can apply our result to that, and then just figure out how to map the underlying distribution over actual alternatives into this utility. And then you sort of get the same characterization. Things do get a bit tricky, admittedly, if you have both multiple alternatives and interdependent values. You can push it a little bit in that direction, but the fully general case, we don't know actually.
So my intuition is it affects when you can get a profitable mechanism, right? So if it's possible that sometimes I hate it, sometimes the other person like it, then we always have a profitable.
In principle,
mechanism.
yes, some intuition of this is correct. So
Some intuition.
for example, we have this result, right? If we have a full rank correlation structure, you can only implement constant mechanisms. Now this would translate to the ex post utilities of the agents have to be constant, but that doesn't mean the designer's utility is also constant. So, and in fact, there are examples where even with full rank, you can profitably design a mechanism, and it builds exactly on this intuition trait.
Yeah. So the mechanism I have in mind is that whenever they both like it, I flip a coin, and whenever someone doesn't like it, the other person like it, I would give it to the person who likes it. So I think that's always a profitable mechanism in your setting, if you allow people to dislike mechanism. But we can talk more on this. Yeah.
No, so we didn't think about this specific example. That sounds very good. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so Johannes had to run, so we are going to thank him for his paneling in his absence. Meanwhile, are there any other questions from the audience? We still have a couple of minutes. No, Francesco, you always have a question.
I actually, since I didn't understand what the question I had before during the presentation. I'm still unclear exactly what you have in mind. I would just to reiterate, if there's at least 3 types, matching reports of independent types requires that you're on the diagonal, right?
No,
of the matrix.
But you can relate, suppose.
No, so I appreciate that it's the relabeling I don't understand, but
okay. But yeah, let me phrase it differently maybe. So what we say is you can basically think about any permutation matrix. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is an incentive compatible mechanisms. And like you have the ones in like you have only one in the row and in the column. And then, like this is basically, I define your types, to be the same by relabeling them. You can think of this like this, but maybe it's easier to think about this as a permutation matrix.
Right, or not reporting types, but reporting generic messages which are somehow linked through this matrix to types. Yeah, okay, fair enough.
That is the,
so you even out the probability that we match and the probability that we don't match, basically, given that, for example, we have a third distribution or something like that, right?
Yeah, okay. Exactly. Yeah, this is the trick from the example.
Okay. I mean, my comment on this is that I would invest heavily in a monitoring technology if I was in this situation. That's my comment.
In what?
If I was in this mechanism design problem, if I was the mechanism designer, I would invest in a monitoring technology.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So if we are going to those kind of comments, maybe we should stop the recording before. Let me just thank everyone for joining us. Deniz for the great presentation, co-authors, and Johannes and Yingni for paneling. Why don't we stop the recording now? Actually, I can do it myself. Excellent. Can I have a question if you still have time, Deniz?
No.
So if this is 2-player or two agent situation, probably you can extend it to more than 2 with maintaining still the zero-sum kind of situation. Like, I'm thinking more of a 2 people on one side and 1 person on the other side, kind of voting scenario, still without transfers as in voting, because it seems like something that can fit.
It depends, right? So if you then start to if you have correlation between the 2, like suppose you have 2 aligned agents and 1 like 2 left agents and 1 right agent. Then if you start like between the 2 left agents, there's no longer the zero sum. So suppose they should have the same type.
Yeah.
And then you could say, okay, if you don't report a consistent type, I do right. Right. So you could break the zero sum logic between them. It depends. Yeah. So
Okay.
Deniz, good job.
Dennis, I think we're going back to Tillman's book. The reference to this Kramer-McLean with balanceness is Kovenok and Severinov, I think.
Okay.
But this comes from Tillman's book,
I have Tillman's
which
book.
I have next to me right now.
I have it here too. But Tillman is gone. So
Tillman is
Also,
gone. So
I have a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
go ahead. Sorry, Yingni. No, I finished.
No. I think someone also mentioned this verification literature you put on slide. I don't think you should put it there, right?
yeah, maybe. But it's in a sense what the reason for that is that we say these problems exist in practice, and verification is often one of the solutions to it that we don't use. And your paper is another solution that we don't use.
Yeah.
And that is what is left, correlation. In some sense, maybe I should be more clear about that. Yeah.
I see.
But it is really like an attempt to like if we reflect about what can we do without transfers, then yeah, these are the options. And if someone has a new idea, I think that would be great.
So yeah, you link decisions, you burn money. I think that's the bit of a literature that
the ordeal literature, yes.
You do that.
Piotr has, I think, some has a paper now on how to allocate equity with an ordeal mechanism. That is, this is burning money basically. Yeah.
Right. So transfers, but not bad transfers basically, wasting people's time or effort and so on. And then there's monitoring, verification, and then you guys are basically looking at the very worst case scenario. There's nothing you can do.
To be done. Yes. Yeah. Well, you have to find some research questions, right? So.
No. I mean, I think it's absolutely, in a way, something that needed to be done, right? I mean, it is, what's the worst that can happen? Now we kind of know more about it than we did before.
Yeah, but still find some positive there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's a positive message, of course.
And then there's, of course, this kind of reversal of a standard intuition that comes from Kramer and McLean. Yeah. And indeed, actually, if I can make this other point, Kramer and McLean, I think, has the obvious drawbacks that it's something that we don't observe in the real world because in the real world you have risk aversion, you have exposed participation constraints. All of this that you guys are doing is something that you could still do if you were still worried about exposed participation, or if you were worried about risk aversion. It doesn't really impinge upon that. I don't know about risk aversion, but you know what I mean. I suppose that the kind of problems you're looking at, allocation, I could choose not to participate in the allocation game, but what's my outside option? I don't get it. So, in some ways, that in a way makes what you're doing a little bit more useful, because Kramer-McLean, I don't know how about you guys, but I see it as it's one of those results that's kind of an abstract reference point that you sort of try to explain why it doesn't really happen like that, right? I don't know, but
yeah, in some sense, I think we're coming out from reading Kramer-McLean, but for me, rereading it now, it is magical. The agents know more about each other, and it becomes easier to screen them. In some sense, this is good for us, because then I think our side is more intuitive than, but everybody has read Kramer-McLean, so we can kind of, but the intuition that you know less about your opponent, so it's easier to screen you. It is this is the magic of Kramer-McLean, that this doesn't hold true with transfers. So yeah. Something we learned from this paper.
Okay. Are there any other further comments or questions? We had quite a busy chat, so maybe I should actually save it.
So, and actually, I have to say, Dennis, I'm very happy to see there were quite a few people, which after several months of of break was not an obvious outcome. So thank you for helping us achieving
Thank you
decent turnout as well.
Thank you for inviting me. This was like, I was, it's it is quite something that you can find. Like, I think at some point I saw 50 people interested in economic theory. I think that's really something worth preserving, and it's
a statistic. It's
I tell people in my university that we have 1,000 people registered, which sounds even much more impressive because we do have 1,000 people registered, but of course maybe somebody registered a year ago, but so there's potentially 1,000 people out there that are interested in these things.
Well, but you have some
now you
YouTube
make it
videos.
sound worse.
No. But today's attendance is absolutely no. Today's attendance is what we would normally expect. I was worried that because we had 4 months break or something like that, 3 months break, that we would lose some. But no, it's.
Oh, it was particularly good today.
Yeah.
So, some of our YouTube videos have a great record of being seen, but I think it's correlated with whether authors put the links on their web pages. So, if you want to put yours,
we have four,
of course.
Four potential.
Four, yes.
Like, all scales up. Yeah. Very nice.
I have a meeting in 10 minutes, so I'm gonna have to go. But Deniz, thank you very much. Great to see you. Hope to see you soon. We're not too far from each other.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you
very
much.
Thank you very much. We'll be finishing. So thank you all for coming, and see you next week or in weeks that will come after that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
for organizing this, and thank you, Yingni and Johannes. This was great. Thanks. Thank you.
Bye.